Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam with Historic Travels and welcome to another video. And as always, before we get started today, I'd just like to take a quick moment to welcome all my new subscribers and to thank everybody who's been leaving me comments and messages down below. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. And hey, if you don't know it yet, there's a Patreon and a merch store for this channel in the links below. So if you would like to take a couple extra steps to help support the channel a little bit more, well, there's links and there's ways to do that. So thank you guys, I really appreciate it. And all right guys, well hey, it is now time for part 2 of the Costa Concordia video. Now, if you have not watched part 1 yet, I highly encourage you to do so. There's a link for that in the description below. So go and watch that video before you watch this one, because this video is a complete continuation of the part 1 Costa Concordia story, and we're going to start up right where we left off with the first video. All right, everybody. Well, hey, without any further ado, let's get into today's topic. In the last episode, we talked about how the cruise ship Costa Concordia, while attempting to perform a sail-by salute of the island of Giulio, ended up coming in too close towards the island and struck some rocks just off the coastline. And then the vessel ended up beaching itself just off the coast of the same island and ended up partially capsizing. In this episode, we are going to continue the story of the Costa Concordia and tell the story of the ship and all the people who were on board the vessel that night. Now, in the last episode, we talked about how the bridge crew on board the Costa Concordia were not being very open with people as to the true extent to the danger they were in on board the Costa Concordia after the vessel hit the rock. Remember, the bridge crew did not tell the Coast Guard, they did not tell like the people on the island of Giulio or anybody who could actually help out the extent of the damage and the situation they were facing. The only people the bridge crew at this point have told that the ship's in trouble is the Costa Company's emergency hotline, but they don't have any immediate access to get help to the vessel. Everybody else who can actually help is still in the dark. They think that this is just a blackout, although they are kind of suspicious. And you see, this is also true for the passengers. Right up to the point that the vessel hit the rock and the power failed, the bridge crew only told the passengers that they were just experiencing a blackout. And as the vessel was doing all of those weird maneuvers you saw in the last episode before the vessel actually ended up beaching itself on the rocks, the passengers on board the Concordia were beginning to get more and more suspicious of the bridge crew, and some of them actually started to take matters into their own hands. You see, from the moment the Costa Concordia ended up striking the rock, leading up to the moment at which the vessel finally beached itself just off the coast of the island of Giulio, this entire process took roughly 24 minutes. And you see, during this time, the vessel would end up initially listing to port, and then the vessel would end up listing to starboard. And to all the passengers on board who were experiencing this, well, they were concerned. And up to this point, the bridge crew was still telling all the passengers that it was just a blackout. But all the while, the passengers are noticing the Costa Concordia listing more and more. So you see, at this point, the passengers on board the ship, since they weren't getting any answers or response from the bridge crew, ended up taking matters into their own hands and started going to the lifeboats on the Costa Concordia themselves. And upon learning this, the bridge crew actually made an announcement to all of the passengers in response to their actions. Upon learning what some of the passengers on board the Costa Concordia were doing, the bridge crew actually sent a member of the ship's staff down to deck 4 on board the Costa Concordia, where all the vessel's lifeboats were, and actually told the passengers who were waiting there to go back to their rooms and wait while they fixed the ship's electric generator. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Because maybe at this point, the crew did not know for certain that the Costa Concordia was going to sink yet. However, they were completely aware that the vessel was taking on water. And you have to remember that a lot of staterooms on these ships are actually pretty close to the waterline below deck 4. So by telling passengers just to go back to their rooms and wait, you are sending passengers deep inside a potentially sinking vessel. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? What if the water actually reaches a deck where these passengers are sitting waiting in their staterooms? You could potentially trap them in their room and they would drown when the ship sinks. Completely naive and complete negligence of the ship's crew to actually make this announcement, in my opinion. And you see, something else that's going on that I can't even begin to comprehend is that the bridge crew, or the crew on the Concordia in general, have not begun to prep the ship's lifeboats yet. Let's actually jump to the Titanic for a moment here and compare the Titanic to the Costa Concordia. Do you want to know what Captain Smith did not long after the Titanic struck the iceberg? Before they even knew for certain that the Titanic was sinking, one of the first actions the captain did was he had the crew begin prepping the Titanic's lifeboats just as a precaution, just in case they would need to evacuate. The Costa Concordia's crew did no such thing. So the only thing the crew was doing at this point on board the Concordia was just trying to figure out the situation of the ship and to find out for certain if the vessel was sinking or not. All the while, they're not telling anyone, the Coast Guard, the passengers, anybody, what's really going on. This was complete negligence of the ship's crew, in my opinion. And honestly, they put so many more lives at risk by not telling passengers what was going on and just by telling them to go and wait in their staterooms. Now, the Costa Concordia had finally beached itself off of the coast of the island of Giglio at roughly 10:15 p.m. However, even after this had happened, the bridge crew on the ship still didn't order an abandoned ship, even though the Costa Concordia's list to starboard had greatly increased and greatly accelerated upon the vessel making contact with the seafloor just off the coast of the island of Giglio. In fact, the listing of the ship got so bad that the passengers actually started climbing into the lifeboats of the Concordia themselves without any crew or any members of the ship's staff to assist them. And then finally, at 10:35 p.m., the Costa Concordia's bridge crew finally ordered an abandoned ship. Now also remember, it was right around the time that they finally ordered abandoned ship on board the Costa Concordia that they finally alerted the Coast Guard and other emergency personnel that the Costa Concordia was in trouble and needed assistance. I mean, honestly, I can't even believe it took them this long to at least alert the Coast Guard. They even kept it quiet from them. They kept it quiet from the passengers and the Coast Guard, the two people you should keep informed as to what's going on your ship. I mean, I can't even comprehend that. But because they waited this long to alert anyone, it would take the Coast Guard roughly another hour and a half to actually arrive on scene to begin helping the passengers on board the Costa Concordia. And another problem is because they waited so long to begin the evacuation of this vessel, they missed their very narrow window of time for them to actually begin launching the Costa Concordia's lifeboats. This is just my Carnival model, just pretend it's a Concordia. They missed their very narrow of time where they would actually be able to launch the Costa Concordia's lifeboat successfully while the ship was still resting on a more or less even keel. Because they waited so long, the Concordia was continuing to list more and more heavily to starboard. And this would in turn make it extremely difficult to launch some of the Costa Concordia's lifeboats. Eventually, it would make it impossible for them to launch the lifeboats from the ship. So they were really in a narrow race against the clock to try to get as many lifeboats off the Costa Concordia as possible before the listing of the ship proved to be so great that any more lifeboats launched from this vessel would be impossible. Now, I will say this for the crew on board the Costa Concordia. Once they actually ordered the evacuation and began mustering the passengers and began putting the lifeboats in the water, they were pretty efficient during this process. They did a pretty reasonable job at getting all the passengers organized and getting the lifeboats in the water in a quick and organized rate. However, the biggest issue they were facing at this point was the listing of the vessel due to the very late response of the ship's bridge crew in ordering the evacuation of the Concordia. Now, just to clarify one detail here, I do not blame all the members of the Costa Concordia's crew for everything that happened during the initial stages of the sinking. The only people I blame for that are the actual bridge crew on board the Costa Concordia for not sharing the information as to what's going on with the whole ship. What you have to remember is there's a large number of crew members on board the Costa Concordia who are just as much in the dark as to what's going on as the actual passengers and Coast Guard were. They're waiting for instructions from the bridge crew as to what do we need to do. And once they were notified, a lot of these crew members were the ones who were actually handling putting the lifeboats in the water, getting the passengers organized, and handling the muster stations. And they did a pretty reasonably good job. And yeah, I think they should get praise for handling the evacuation as best they could, given the circumstances that they found themselves in. Now, as the sinking of the Costa Concordia was progressing, the island of Giglio actually did send a number of rescue ships to the Concordia from the shoreline in order to help with the evacuation. And it's a good thing they did this too, because as the sinking of the ship was progressing, the list to starboard was now getting to the point where it was so severe that it would be next to impossible, if not completely impossible, to launch any lifeboats from the ship's port side anymore. So essentially what they had to do was all the lifeboats that they launched from the ship's starboard side, they essentially went to shore, dropped off the lifeboat's passengers, and then those lifeboats and other vessels went back to the Costa Concordia and picked up more passengers. However, even though this was partially effective, they did not have enough time to do this. The listing of the Costa Concordia was getting so severe that they actually had to abandon deck 4, and all the passengers had to retreat to the ship's port side and begin climbing on the ship's actual hull and sit on the side of the ship while they waited on the Coast Guard and other vessels to figure out a means to get them off of the vessel. Now, by the time the Costa Concordia ended up rolling over and resting on its starboard side, there was still around 200 passengers on board the vessel, clinging to the vessel and resting on the ship's hull, waiting to be rescued. Now, that is horrible. By this point, there should have been no passengers on board the vessel at this point. However, one thing that I do need to say, by the time the order to evacuate the ship was given at 10:30 p.m., 10:35 p.m., right around there, the vessel completely rolled onto its starboard side in less than an hour. So that means in that short amount of time, they actually managed to get most of the 4,000 or so passengers on board the ship off the vessel. Honestly, given that short time frame of time that the crew who didn't know what was going on had to evacuate the passengers, I think they did a pretty good job. But still, there shouldn't have been any passengers left on the vessel. If the bridge crew would have given the order to evacuate as soon as they were suspicious that something was going on with the ship, they would have had more than enough time to get everybody off before the vessel got to this dangerous position and before the time that people would have been forced to climb through the ship's windows and decks and all that to wait on the ship's hull for rescue. Now, by the time the Coast Guard had arrived on scene, the crew that were still helping the passengers evacuate the Costa Concordia had actually set up these massive ladders on the ship's side that the people still on board the ship were using to climb down the ship's hull and get to the rescue boats waiting on the water. Now, as the Coast Guard was investigating, it soon became apparent that one key member of the Costa Concordia's crew, Captain Schettino, had actually already left the vessel in one of the ship's lifeboats and was resting comfortably on shore watching the rescue play out. And upon learning this, the Coast Guard contacted Captain Schettino. And you know what? I think I'm just going to play the audio from their conversation and let you guys form your own opinion on this situation.
Pronto? Sì, buonasera, comandante. Senta, io sono De Falco da Livorno, parlo col comandante? Sì, buonasera, comandante Di Falco. Mi dica il suo nome, per favore. Sono il comandante Schettino, comandante. Schettino? Sì. Ascolti, Schettino. Ci sono persone intrappolate a bordo, adesso lei va con la sua scialuppa. Sotto la prua della nave, lato dritto, c'è una biscaggina. Lei sale su quella biscaggina e va a bordo della nave. Va a bordo della nave e mi viene a dire, mi riporta quante persone ci sono. È chiaro? Io sto registrando questa comunicazione, comandante Schettino. Allora, comandante, le dico una cosa. Parli a voce alta. Allora, la nave adesso, io sono qua di fronte... Comandante, parli a voce... In questo momento, la nave è inclinata... Ho capito. C'è gente, ascolti, c'è gente che sta scendendo dalla biscaggina di prua. Lei quella biscaggina la percorre in senso inverso, sale sulla nave e mi dice quante persone e che cosa hanno a bordo, chiaro? Mi dice se ci sono bambini, donne o persone bisognose di assistenza e me ne dice il numero di ciascuna di queste categorie, è chiaro? Guardi Schettino che lei si è salvato forse dal mare, ma io la porto veramente molto male, le faccio passare l'anima dei guai. Vado a bordo, cazzo! Comandante, per cortesia. Che sta facendo, comandante? Sto qua per coordinare i soccorsi. Che sta coordinando lì? Vado a bordo, mi coordini i soccorsi da bordo. Lei si rifiuta? No, non mi sto rifiutando. Lei si sta rifiutando di andare a bordo, comandante? No, sto andando. E mi dica qual è il motivo per cui non ci va. Sto andando perché ci sta l'altra lancia che si è fermata. Lei vada a bordo, è un ordine. Però ma si rende conto che è buio e che qua non vediamo nulla. E che vuole tornare a casa, Schettino? È buio, vuole tornare a casa? Salga sulla prua della nave tramite la biscaggina e mi dica ora.
I, no joke, have no words for what I just watched. I cannot believe that the actual captain of the Costa Concordia abandoned his ship and was just sitting on the shoreline watching the rescue play out. And Just to clarify something a little bit here, this isn't just as simple as him hopping into a lifeboat and leaving. He actually took steps to try to prevent himself from being caught. He actually went back to his room after the order to evacuate was given, changed into a suit, then went and got into a lifeboat and left the vessel. And it turns out, I found this out too, at the time of the sinking, Captain Scatino was a married man, and he was on board the vessel with his mistress. Yeah. Wow, that shows a real good judge of character right there on you, man. Listen, that's pretty messed up. And then anyway, a little bit later, after the rescue was completed and the cleanup of the Costa Concordia wreck site was actually underway, Captain Scatino ended up going to trial for this, which he should. You know, a captain should be the last person off a vessel. You are the captain of a ship. It is your responsibility to make sure all the passengers and crew that are on that ship and under your watch get off the vessel before it sinks. Anyway, at the trial for this, he actually said, and I'm not making this up, he tripped and fell into a lifeboat. I'm sorry, but it makes me mad just talking about it. And then he has the guts to say to the Coast Guard that he's coordinating the rescue from the shoreline. Coordinate the rescue on your ship. You are the captain. It is your responsibility to all those people on board that vessel. You know Captain Smith on the Titanic? He didn't leave the ship until quite literally the final moments of the sinking. Captain Smith was last seen going into the water as the bridge of the Titanic right here was going under. He never got into a lifeboat. He never did anything. He was a captain on his vessel, and he did everything he could to ensure that as many people as possible got off the Titanic before it sank. Captain Scatino, you could learn a thing or two from Captain Smith. Now, by the next morning, after the evacuation had basically concluded, it had been discovered that around 32 people had died on board the Costa Concordia during the sinking. Now, with the vessel itself, the ship would in fact stop settling in the water because due to the fact that the vessel was sinking in such shallow water, the vessel would basically end up stabilizing and resting with basically half of the ship sticking up out of the water, and the vessel would be resting completely on its starboard side. So, after Captain Scatino was taken to trial for everything that happened during that night, he was convicted and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Which, honestly, I think he should have gotten worse for that, given the whole circumstances of the tragedy. Believe it or not, Captain Scatino did try to appeal this, and once again, I can't make this up. Those 32 people that died in the sinking, he actually tried to say that that wasn't his fault because they didn't die when the ship hit the rock. They died because of the sinking. I'm not even going to comment on that. That doesn't even qualify for a comment. I can't even comprehend that. So now, after he was dealt with, the only other issue was what to do about the wreck of the Costa Concordia. The people at the island of Giglio did not want that massive vessel being stuck there forever, and there were environmental concerns as well because the vessel had, fuel on board and a bunch of other stuff that they didn't want to contaminate the local waters if the ship was to break up. So then a massive effort was put into effect to try and actually salvage the vessel and actually refloat it and tow it away from the island of Giglio to be taken to a scrapyard where the ship would in fact be broken up. The whole process to raise the Costa Concordia took a period of around 2 years. Essentially what they did first was build this custom crane system that could actually pull the vessel and allow it to sit upright in the water. And then once they did this, they connected a series of ballast tanks on both sides of the vessel to allow them to partially refloat the ship so it could be towed to a port where the vessel could in fact be broken up. This whole process took a period of 2 years, and quite honestly, it is one of the most impressive salvage operations I have ever seen. But in the end, it was a complete success, and the Costa Concordia was successfully towed away from the island of Giglio and broken up in a scrapyard. So yeah, now you guys know the story of the Costa Concordia. Now, if we take a look at this tragedy looking back on it from a retrospective, to be honest, I'm very surprised that only 32 people died when this vessel went down. Just given how short of a time frame they had from the moment that the order to evacuate was given, and given how much miscommunication there was on the ship that night, to be honest, it's a miracle that only 32 people died. Now, don't take what I'm saying out of context here. It is a tragedy that those 32 people died. And honestly, they shouldn't have died at all. The crew, if they would have handled the evacuation properly, it looks like they would have had more than enough time to get everybody off before the ship sank. But given how the entire disaster played out, to be honest, we are very lucky that this disaster was not a lot worse than what it actually was. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. And yeah, now you know the story of the Costa Concordia. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thank you all for being here. And be sure to like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And yeah, you guys just keep doing what you do. You guys are awesome. If you have any video ideas or any suggestions for future videos, please leave it in the comments below. And hey, without any further ado, thank you all again. All right, everybody. Well, hey, you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good night, everybody. Special thanks to my very first captain level Patreon supporter, John Shepard. Thank you so much for all the support, man.